Many think that some big bang caused all the infinite processes that we see in nature. It's just some big bang, just some explosion that caused all of that. That's not what we know about explosions. You know, a process, every process that's going to produce a desired result requires someone to put that process in order. You know, for instance, if you had a construction site and you were going to build a building, build a house, you can have all the raw materials uh, delivered sitting on the construction site, but unless you have builders, uh, electricians, plumbers, uh, painters, and things like that, that house is not going to be built. That purposeful structure is not going to happen. Or you could be in surgery. You have all the surgical equipment there. Without the one with skill and intelligence to use that, the operation cannot go forward. So if you need, we make the analogy again, if you need uh, such skill and intelligence to operate on the body, how much more for the actual production of the body? Yes, logically, for processes to work, for instance, the assembly line put into action by Henry Ford, it required someone to put that process in order to get to the desired result, which is producing a car. So someone had to put it in order. It just doesn't happen. And we see that in nature, there's infinite amount of processes everywhere that work in harmony with each other to produce a desired result. And that would require someone to put those processes in order for you to have the particular outcome or production that it happens. Couldn't just happen by chance, by an explosion. So everything points to creation, to a creator. As Hebrews 3:4 says, of course, every house is constructed by someone, but the one who constructed all things is God. So it's just a logical conclusion that for things to have come about, it had to have a creator. As we look at the various civilizations, they point to that. And they do that because they have all their different worships of gods and various types of gods. It points to a core fact that there is a God. It's just the truthfulness, the details of who he is what needs to be understood. Many grapple with the thought of, well, where did God come from? Okay, that's a question you can ask, but when you get to the conclusion of the matter, it may not be what you want. Look on the side of the evolution, they talk about Big Bang, big explosion just happened and everything exploded in order, and that's illogical. But even if you were to say Big Bang, this big explosion, where did it come from? I can ask you the same question. Where did that come from? And then you're going to make up something and say, well, it came from this. Then I can ask you where that come from. You see what's happening? We're going into a zip code, so to speak, that's incomprehensible. Because the answer is right in front of us, that God had no beginning, as Psalms 90 shows correctly, from everlasting to everlasting, you're God. So the answer to the question is something that you can't comprehend, which is not surprising since God created all the universe. It would not be surprising that he would be somewhat beyond our comprehension. And the only logical conclusion to the one who created everything was that he had no beginning. And that's the answer to the question. Now, if you want to dwell on that and get your brain all messed up, go ahead and do it. But you're not going to be able to comprehend it. All you can do is appreciate it. Romans 1 brings out verse 19. It says, because what may be known about God is clearly evident among them, for God made it clear to them. For his invisible qualities are clearly seen from the world's creation onward, because they are perceived by the things made, even his eternal power and Godship, so that they are inexcusable. So just by the little reasoning that we've done, it's inexcusable to ignore that all things came into being by a creator. But why do people not want God? Why do they want to go to such fraudulent philosophies? Why do they want these things to be so? Well, Psalms 114:1 brings out, the foolish one says in his heart, there is no Jehovah. Their actions are corrupt, and their dealings are detestable. No one is doing good. Yes. It's because they want to do as they want to do. They don't want to do what's right. They want to do what tickles their ears, what appeals to their desires. As Romans chapter 1 brings out, as they deny God and who he is, they go into their satisfying their own desires. Darwin classified his own white race as more advanced than those lower organisms, such as pygmies, and he called different people groups savage, low, and degraded. Evolutionist Stephen Jay Gould brings out, he showed that this argument of racial hierarchy biologically, he said, was not confined to Darwin, but he said in 1850, he says, in his writings in 1977, he says biological arguments for racism may have been common before 1859, but they increased by orders of magnitude following the acceptance of evolutionary theory. Toward the end of the life of Charles Darwin in 1881, he wrote to a colleague that the more civilized so-called Caucasian races have beaten the Turkish hollow in the struggle for existence. Looking to the world at no very distant date, what an endless number of the lower races will have been eliminated by the higher civilized races throughout the world. This was not just some offhand comment unrelated to Darwin's science. It reflected important elements of his theory of human evolution. Indeed, he articulated this same principle in his scientific study of human evolution as the book The Descent of Man in 1871, where he claimed at some future period, not very distant, as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace throughout the world the savage races. Not only racism, but racial extermination has an integral feature in Darwin's theory from the start. So its premise was always to exalt the white race. But we know 1,043 scientists dissent from it because they realize it has no logic, it has no facts. The only reason it's there is to promote white supremacy. Because of the agendas of people, you have to be very careful of what they're saying. People have to have the ability to verify things, not just accept them because people claim, well, I'm a scientist, I'm this or that, and therefore I must be believed, whatever I say. You cannot go on that premise if you're going to be able to not be a victim of such fraudulent theories such as evolution. You have to be able to have a process of verifying, of making sure that what's being brought to your attention is actually true. We got to be able to have that mentality that the Bible talks about, of making sure of all things. So you got that mentality, disinformation, propaganda, those things, they can bring them your direction, but they don't mean anything because you're going the next step further. You're making sure and verifying whether these things are true or not. Why we have to even discuss this stuff is mind-boggling. But we know why, because the powers that be have the money to make it an issue and have the ability to make people victims of this. And so now you have to address it and to talk people out of it by logic and by reason and by what the facts actually show. And so once we come to that understanding, now we deal with the real issue, finding out who God is, learning about God, and benefiting from that process.